Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Reminder to tax-exempt organizations 990's other forms due on May 17th. Information and tools available to help. IR 2021-104, May 7, 2021, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service today reminds tax-exempt organizations that operate on a calendar year CY basis that certain annual information and tax returns they file with the IRS are due on May 17th, 2021. These returns are the Form 990 Series Annual Information Returns, Form 990, 990EZ, 990PF, 990BL, in other words, Form 990N, Electronic Notice, the e-Postcard for tax-exempt organizations not required to file Form 990 or Form 990EZ. Form 990T, Exempt Organization Business Income Tax Return other than certain trusts. Form 4720, Return of certain excise taxes under Chapters 41 and 42 of the Internal Revenue Code. Mandatory electronic filing. Organizations filing a Form 990, 990PF, or 990N for CY calendar year 2020 must file their returns electronically. Organizations filing Form 990EZ for CY calendar year 2020 received transitional relief and may file electronically or in paper. To help exempt organizations comply with their filing requirements, the IRS provides a series of pre-recorded online workshops. There's a link to those workshops here. These workshops are designed to assist officers, board members, and volunteers with the steps they need to take to maintain their tax-exempt status, including filing annual information returns. Quote, "We want to make sure everyone in the exempt sector understands their obligations," end quote, said Robert Malone, Exempt Organizations and Government Entities Director. Quote, "The IRS offers an interactive walkthrough of the annual Form 990 filing process and other courses that board members and volunteers can take to learn about maintaining their charity's tax-exempt status," end quote. Extension of time to file. Tax-exempt organizations that need additional time to file beyond the May 17th deadline can request an automatic extension by filing Form 886A, Application for Extension of Time to File an Exempt Organization Return. An organization will be allowed a 6-month extension beyond the original due date. In situations where tax is due, extending the time for filing a return does not extend the time for paying tax. So the IRS encourages organizations to requesting an extension to electronically file Form 8868. So if you do have a tax obligation and not simply a filing obligation, then you want to keep those two things separate in your mind if you're thinking about filing then an extension. So auto revocation. Under Section 6033J of the Internal Revenue Code, organizations that fail to file their Form 990 series for 3 consecutive years automatically lose their exempt status. So don't do that. You don't want to lose the exempt status for that reason. So this is referred to as, quote, auto revocation, end quote. The IRS is experiencing delays in processing paper returns in our service centers. Although organizations may file their calendar year CY 2020 Form 990EZ in paper, the IRS is encouraging them to electronically file their Form 990EZ to avoid auto revocation. This is especially important for organizations that did not file their information returns for calendar year 2018 and calendar year 2019. So if you're close to that 3-mark deadline and you need to file the return, then you want to do it electronically, they're saying, because you don't want the lag on the IRS's side to process the paper returns because they are backed up and they're trying to get everything online and they're restricted and all that kind of stuff. Then you'd like to get the electronic return to get it processed as soon as possible just to make sure that you don't run into any problems with the exempt status. So small tax exempt organizations may be eligible to file Form 990N to satisfy their annual information return requirement. These organizations need only 8 items of basic information to complete the submission, which must be electronically filed. The Form 990N Due date cannot be extended, but there is no monetary penalty for late submissions. Although there is no monetary penalty for filing Form 990N late, organizations that failed to file their required Form 990N for calendar year 2018 and calendar year 2019 and file after May 17, 2021 are auto-revoked. What can an organization do if auto-revoked? The IRS publishes a list, there's a link to that list here, of and mails notices to organizations whose exempt status has been automatically revoked. The law prohibits the IRS from undoing a proper automatic revocation, but the IRS has procedures in place to assist organizations that believe they have been erroneously listed as auto-revoked. So you can go through that process if they think it was an error in the revocation process. So this includes situations where an organization has documentation that it met its filing requirement for 1 or more years during the 3 consecutive year period. So obviously, if they revoked it in error on this auto-revoking thing, which basically means you hadn't filed for 3 years, then how do you prove otherwise? You'd have to prove that you did actually file within that time period. So, for example, if an organization receives a notice of automatic revocation or is listed as auto-revoked effective May 17, 2021, but has documentation, it filed a paper form 990EZ or Form 8868 for calendar year 2020 by that date, it can fax us the relevant information and IRS receipt for a filed return, for example, at 855-247-6123. So this looks like that situation they're talking about with the paper return. So if you hadn't filed the paper return, you need to get it in because you want to make sure you get it in before the deadline for that 3-year automatic revocation. And the IRS, let's say, doesn't get to it by the time the automatic revocation happens, then they may give you the automatic revocation and you might have recourse in that situation. But you'd rather not have to go through the recourse. The recourse would be basically saying, hey, look, I did file it. I sent it in. Here's the documentation. It went in and it hadn't been processed yet. And you may be able to, fix things at that level. But, of course, what you'd rather have happen is not to be revoked in the first place by getting the documentation in on time. And if you are in that situation where you're basically close to that 3-year deadline, and you have the option to paper file, you may still want to do the electronic filing option because you want to get it in on time and make sure that you don't fall into that situation with the 3-year revocation. So there's going to be links here, and there's some of those phone numbers that you can check out if you want to look into this further, and there'll be a link to this in the description.